Jackson Robert leaned back, whiskey in hand, and asked the waitress how she would invest $1 million, clearly trying to make her feel small. But when Diane Ellis coolly detailed offshore accounts, shell corporations, and crypto moves that mirrored his own secret empire, the laughter in the room died instantly. And when she locked eyes with him and said, "Now, will that be the Via Ossobuco?" the Mafia boss realized the power dynamic had shifted. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Like, comment, and subscribe because what happens next will blow your mind. Alright, back to the story. "Tell me, sweetheart," Jackson Robert said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass without even looking up. "If you had $1 million, where would you park it?" Laughter rippled around the table. His lieutenants grinned, anticipating the punchline, waiting for the waitress to stumble, blush, or say something idiotic they could mock all night long. Diane Ellis stood perfectly still, tray balanced on her hip. After 9 hours on her feet at Lavinia Doro, this was precisely the kind of customer she'd been hoping to avoid. "I'm sorry, sir," she said smoothly, her voice professional, but her brown eyes were icy. "That's not on tonight's menu." Jackson finally looked up. For a split second, he was taken aback. He'd expected fear, maybe a nervous giggle, averted eyes, the usual reaction when he messed with people. Instead, he was met with a composed young woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, studying him like he was a balance sheet that just didn't quite add up. "It was a joke," he said, tapping his gold-ringed fingers on the polished wood. His smile was slow, dangerous. "But now that you mention it, humor me. Where would you put $1 million in today's market?" Diane's co-workers had warned her about him. Jackson Robert, 35, tattooed hands in a three-piece suit. The kind of guy who controlled half the city's underworld economy, known for his ruthlessness and his penchant for humiliating people when he was bored. Honestly, she met his gaze directly, unflinching. "I'd diversify 40% into offshore accounts in jurisdictions with strong banking privacy laws, Cayman, Switzerland, Singapore. 30% into legitimate shell corporations in emerging markets where oversight is minimal. 20% in real estate holdings under layered LLCs to avoid traceable ownership, and I'd keep 10% liquid in cryptocurrency wallets for rapid movement when regulatory pressure increases." The laughter vanished in an instant. Jackson's half-smile froze. He set down his glass, leaning forward. The candlelight caught the ink on his knuckles. A crown and a cross. That's surprisingly specific. His eyes narrowed. "Did you memorize that from somewhere?" "No, sir. Just an opinion." Diane kept her expression neutral. "Now, about your actual order." "Wait." Jackson raised a hand. "Explain the offshore rationale. Why those jurisdictions specifically?" Diane glanced at her other tables. "I have customers waiting. They can wait." Jackson gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Sit. 5 minutes. I'll make it worth your while. I could lose my job." Jackson turned toward the restaurant manager, hovering near the bar. "Marco, I'm borrowing your waitress for a business discussion. Any problems?" Marco's face went pale. "Of course not, Mr. Robert. Take all the time you need." Diane reluctantly sat, setting her notepad down. Her pulse hammered, but her hands remained steady. "This is inappropriate." "So was your surprisingly sophisticated answer about money laundering." Jackson tilted his head. "Where did that come from? Finance degree? Something like that?" "College," she corrected, straightening a fork beside her. "Does it matter? You asked a question. I answered it." Jackson laughed. A low, genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. "Fair enough." He leaned back. "But the cryptocurrency angle, why stress liquidity in that specific percentage?" Diane's voice remained quiet but precise. "Because traditional banking systems are tightening anti-laundering protocols at an unprecedented rate. FATF compliance, FinCEN reporting, international information sharing agreements. They're closing loopholes faster than most criminals realize. Cryptocurrency offers anonymity and rapid transfers, but it's volatile. 10% gives you emergency exit capacity without overexposing yourself to forensics. The room went cold. Who are you? Jackson asked, and for the first time that night, there was no mockery in his voice. Diane stood abruptly. Just a waitress with an interest in finance, Mr. Robert. She offered him a small, enigmatic smile. Now, will that be the veal ossobuco, or are we still discussing hypothetical investments? Jackson watched her walk away, his jaw tight, and that was the moment he realized this woman was far more dangerous than anyone else in the room, and that he had no intention of letting her disappear. If this moment made you hold your breath, don't just scroll. Hit subscribe right now because the real story hasn't even started. And trust me, you'll regret missing what comes next. Jackson Robert didn't sleep that night. He stood in his penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the glittering Manhattan skyline, whiskey untouched in his hand. The city sprawled beneath him like a kingdom he'd built with blood and calculated risks. Yet all he could see was her face. Just a waitress with an interest in finance. No waitress spoke like that. No ordinary person casually referenced FinCEN protocols and cryptocurrency forensics with the precision of someone who'd lived inside that world. She'd rattled off shell corporation strategies like she'd built them herself. And those eyes, intelligent, guarded, hiding something deep. For the first time in a decade, someone had caught him completely off guard. Jackson Robert, the man who'd clawed his way from Brooklyn's bloodiest streets to controlling a financial empire worth hundreds of millions, didn't do surprised. He hated it. He needed to know who she was. Marcus, he said without turning around. His consigliere emerged from the shadows of the apartment, tablet in hand. Already running it, boss. But you're not gonna like what I found. Jackson turned sharply. Talk. Diane Ellis, 29. Started at Lavinia 6 months ago. Before that, Marcus scrolled through the screen, frowning. Nothing. No social media footprint. No previous employment records. No family connections. Her credit history starts 18 months ago, like she materialized out of thin air. Jackson's jaw tightened. People don't just appear. Exactly. Marcus looked up. Either she's using a fake identity, or someone scrubbed her records clean. Professional level clean. A chill ran through Jackson's chest, part intrigue, part something darker. Keep digging. I want everything. School records, financial transactions, parking tickets. If she breathed near a computer, I want to know about it. Already on it. Marcus hesitated. Boss, you sure about this? If she's running from something, poking around might draw attention we don't need. Jackson drained his whiskey, the burn doing nothing to quiet his thoughts. I don't care. Find her. Across the city, Diane Ellis sat on the edge of her narrow bed in a studio apartment that smelled like cheap coffee and regret. Her hands trembled as she stared at the encrypted flash drive on her nightstand. The one she kept hidden in her locker at work. The one that contained everything. Her real name, her real life, the case files that had destroyed her career and nearly gotten her killed. Dr. Emily Warren, forensic accountant, Financial Crimes Bureau. She pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the panic clawing up her throat. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Why had she said so much? Why had she let her expertise slip through the carefully constructed cracks of Diane Ellis, the nobody waitress with the quiet life? Because Jackson Robert had looked at her like she was a puzzle to solve, and for one reckless moment, she'd wanted to be seen, not as the ghost she'd become, but as the woman she used to be. And now she'd painted a target on her own back. Diane pulled out her phone, fingers hovering over a contact labeled simply, J. Handler. Emergency only. She could call him, disappear again, new city, new name, new life. It's what she'd been trained to do after the assassination attempt 3 years ago, after her testimony vanished and the case against the Robert Syndicate mysteriously collapsed. But running meant starting over again. Running meant admitting she'd never be safe. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. You gave excellent financial advice tonight. We should talk more, JR. Her blood turned to ice. He'd gotten her number. Of course he had. Men like Jackson Robert didn't ask permission. They took what they wanted and dealt with the consequences later. Diane deleted the message, then powered off her phone entirely. She lay back on her bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and whispered into the silence, "Please, just let me disappear." But deep down, she knew the truth. Jackson Robert wasn't the type of man to let anything go, especially not a mystery wrapped in a waitress uniform who knew exactly how his empire worked. If you've ever hidden a truth you pray no one uncovers, subscribe because the story will hit you harder than you expect. 3 days passed before Jackson returned to Lavinia Doro, 3 days of sleepless nights, dead-end background searches, and a gnawing obsession he couldn't shake. Marcus had come up empty. Diane Ellis was a phantom, and that only made Jackson want answers more. But it was the call from his accountant that changed everything. "We have a problem," Victor had said, his voice tight with worry. "The Zurich account. Someone's been siphoning funds. Small amounts, untraceable patterns. We're missing close to 3 million. Jackson's blood had gone cold. How long? At least 8 months. Maybe longer. 8 months. Someone inside his organization, someone he trusted, was stealing from him. And the theft pattern. It matched exactly what Diane had described that night. Layered shell corporations, emerging market diversions, cryptocurrency liquidity. Coincidence? Jackson Robert didn't believe in those. Now he sat at the same corner table, dressed in a charcoal suit, eyes tracking Diane as she moved through the restaurant with quiet efficiency. She hadn't looked his way once, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew he was there. When she finally approached his table, her face was carefully blank. "Good evening, Mr. Robert. What can I get you tonight?" "Information." His voice was soft, dangerous. "Sit. I'm working. I'll buy out the entire restaurant if I have to." He leaned back, studying her. "We need to talk about financial patterns. Specifically, the ones you described so perfectly 3 nights ago." Something flickered in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or recognition. "I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me, Diane. Or is that even your real name?" He slid a folder across the table. "My accountant discovered irregularities in my offshore accounts. The exact methods you outlined. Shell corporations, cryptocurrency transfers, layered diversification. Either you're psychic or you know something I need to understand." Diane's face went pale. Her fingers trembled as she touched the folder, then pulled back like it burned. "I gave you a hypothetical answer to a hypothetical question. Hypotheticals don't steal $3 million. Jackson's voice dropped lower. "Someone inside my organization is using those exact techniques to rob me blind. And then you, a waitress with no past and too much knowledge, walks into my life and describes the theft perfectly. You think I'm stealing from you?" Her voice cracked slightly, genuine fear breaking through her composure. "I think you know who is." Jackson leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. "And I think you're going to help me find them." "I can't." Diane stood abruptly, panic flooding her features. "I have to go." Jackson caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop her. The touch sent an unexpected jolt through both of them. "You're terrified. Not of me, of something else. Someone else." Diane's breathing quickened. For a moment, she looked like she might run. Then her shoulders sagged, and when she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "You have no idea what you're asking." "Then explain it to me." Jackson released her wrist but didn't break eye contact. "Because right now, you're the only lead I have, and if you won't help me willingly." He let the implication hang in the air. Diane closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were wet with unshed tears. "I used to track money for a living, financial crimes. I was good at it, too good. I found things people didn't want found, and they tried to kill me for it." Jackson's expression shifted, calculation giving way to something almost like understanding. "The Robert Syndicate." She flinched at the name. 3 years ago, my testimony disappeared. My life disappeared. And the people who tried to kill me, they're still out there. And now you're standing in my restaurant, surrounded by the very people you once tried to destroy. Jackson's voice was strangely gentle. "That takes either courage or desperation." "Desperation," Diane whispered. "I needed to disappear where no one would think to look, in plain sight, serving drinks to the monsters I used to hunt. Jackson sat back slowly, his mind racing. Then he smiled, cold, calculated, and utterly ruthless. Then let's hunt together. The restaurant closed at midnight, but Diane stayed late. She always did, cleaning tables no one else wanted to touch, polishing silverware until her reflection stared back at her. Anything to delay returning to her empty apartment, where the walls felt like they were closing in. She'd avoided Jackson for the rest of his dinner, passing his table to another server, hiding in the kitchen until Marco told her he'd left. But his words echoed in her mind like a threat she couldn't escape. Then let's hunt together. She'd fled before he could say more, but she knew men like Jackson Robert didn't make offers. They made ultimatums. The dining room was dark now, lit only by the amber glow of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Diane wiped down the last table, her movements mechanical, her thoughts spiraling. Then she heard the lock click. She spun around, heart hammering. Jackson stood in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the kitchen light behind him. He'd removed his suit jacket, sleeves rolled up to reveal the tattoos that crawled up his forearms. Names, dates, symbols of a life built on violence. "We're closed," Diane said, hating how her voice shook. "I paid Marco to give us privacy." Jackson stepped into the dining room, hands in his pockets, movements unhurried. "You ran before we finished our conversation. There's nothing to finish." Diane backed toward the service station, calculating distances, exits. "I can't help you. Can't or won't." He moved closer, not threatening, but inevitable like a tide she couldn't outrun. "Because right now, someone's stealing millions from me, and you're the only person who understands how they're doing it. Find another accountant." Her back hit the wall, trapped. "I'm done with that life. That life isn't done with you." Jackson stopped 3 feet away, close enough that she could see the scar along his jawline, the exhaustion in his eyes. "You said they tried to kill you. Who?" "I don't know." Diane's hands clenched into fists. The hit was professional. No faces, no names, just bullets and blood, and waking up in witness protection with a new identity and a warning. "Testify again, and next time they'll succeed." Jackson's expression darkened, and the case against my organization vanished like it never existed. Bitterness crept into her voice. "Someone with power made it disappear. Your files, my testimony, everything. I spent 3 years building that case, and it evaporated in 48 hours. Someone inside," Jackson said quietly, more to himself than her. "Someone with access to both law enforcement and my accounts." His eyes snapped back to hers. "That's why you're here. You're still hunting?" "No." Diane shook her head fiercely. "I'm surviving. There's a difference, is there?" Jackson stepped closer, and Diane pressed harder against the wall. "Because you chose this restaurant, my restaurant, out of every place in Manhattan. You could have hidden anywhere, but you came here. I needed a job that paid cash. You needed to watch." Jackson's voice was soft, understanding in a way that terrified her more than threats. "To see if the people who destroyed your life would walk through those doors. To know if you were safe or if they were still hunting you." Tears burned Diane's eyes. "Stop. I can't." Jackson's hand came up slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek, catching a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Because whoever tried to kill you is the same person stealing from me. And if we don't find them first, they'll finish what they started." "Why do you care?" Diane whispered. "I'm nobody to you. You're the woman who saw through me in 30 seconds. Jackson's thumb traced her jawline, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Who stood in a room full of killers and didn't blink. Who's been hiding in plain sight with more courage than my entire organization combined." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her forehead. "Help me find the traitor, and I'll give you what you really want." "What's that?" "Your life back." Jackson pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Your real name, your reputation. Revenge against whoever tried to erase you." Diane's chest tightened. "And if I refuse?" Jackson's smile was sad, almost apologetic. "Then they'll kill us both eventually. But at least together we have a chance. Diane stood in Jackson's penthouse office at 2 a.m., surrounded by leather-bound ledgers and encrypted laptops, and wondered when exactly she'd lost her mind. "This is insane," she muttered, pulling up another screen of financial transactions. "If anyone finds out I'm here, they won't." Jackson set down a cup of coffee beside her, his presence a constant heat at her shoulder. "My men think you're a consultant I flew in from Geneva. Marcus doesn't even know your real name yet," Diane thought, anxiety coiling in her stomach. She'd agreed to this devil's bargain 3 days ago, and every moment since felt like walking a tightrope over an abyss. One slip, one person recognizing Dr. Emily Warren beneath the Diane Ellis disguise, and everything would collapse. But Jackson had been right about one thing. She couldn't run forever. "Show me the Zurich accounts," she said, pushing emotion aside and letting her training take over. Jackson slid a laptop across the mahogany desk. "Everything's there: transactions, shell companies, routing numbers. Victor thinks the theft started 8 months ago, but I'm not convinced." Diane's fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes scanning rows of data with practiced precision. Numbers had always made sense to her. They didn't lie, didn't manipulate, didn't pretend to be something they weren't, unlike people. "There," she pointed at a series of small transfers, each under $10,000. Structuring classic money laundering technique keeps individual transactions below federal reporting thresholds. Jackson leaned over her shoulder, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and dark. "I know what structuring is. What I don't know is who's doing it. Give me a minute." Diane opened another window, cross-referencing account numbers with Shell Corporation registrations. Her heart began to race as patterns emerged. Familiar patterns she'd seen before. "No, it can't be." She pulled up another file, then another, her hands trembling now. "What?" Jackson's voice sharpened. "What did you find?" "These routing protocols." Diane's voice came out hollow. "The layered LLCs, the cryptocurrency conversion timing, even the bank choices. I've seen this before." "Where?" She turned to face him, her face ghost white. 3 years ago, in the case I built against your organization." Her words tumbled out faster. "But this isn't your methodology, Jackson. Someone copied my own investigation, used my research to create a theft network identical to what I'd exposed." Jackson's jaw clenched. "Explain." Diane stood abruptly, pacing, her mind racing. "When my case disappeared, all my files vanished. Financial maps, account structures, money trail documentation. I thought they were destroyed." She turned back to him, eyes wide with realization. "But what if they weren't? What if someone kept them, used them as a blueprint to steal from me?" Jackson's voice went deadly quiet. "Using your own work as a manual, and to frame me if anyone ever traced it back." Diane's laugh was bitter, broken. "I've been living in fear for 3 years, thinking I escaped, but I just walked into a trap that's been waiting for me this entire time." Jackson crossed to her in 2 strides, gripping her shoulders. "Who had access to your files?" "FBI, Financial Crimes Bureau, the prosecutors." Diane's breath hitched. "And anyone in your organization who might have had inside contacts." "Marcus," Jackson said flatly. "You don't know that. He's my consigliere. He has access to everything: my accounts, my contacts, my operations." Jackson's hands tightened on her shoulders, not painfully, but desperately. "And he's the one who made the charges against me disappear 3 years ago. I thought he was protecting me." Diane saw the betrayal fracturing across Jackson's face, the realization that the person he trusted most might be the knife aimed at his back. "We need proof," she whispered. "Then find it." Jackson released her, his expression hardening into something ruthless and cold. "Tear apart every file, every transaction. I want to know exactly how deep this goes." Diane nodded, turning back to the computer. But as her fingers touched the keyboard, a new window popped up, a message from inside Jackson's own network. "Unknown user. Stop digging, Dr. Warren, or this time we won't miss." The coffee cup slipped from Jackson's hand and shattered on the marble floor. Someone inside his house knew exactly who she was. Diane's fingers froze over the keyboard, her blood turning to ice as the message burned into her retinas. Asterisk stop digging, Dr. Warren, or this time we won't miss. Get away from the computer. Jackson's voice cut through her shock, sharp and commanding. Now. But Diane couldn't move. 3 years of running, of hiding, of looking over her shoulder, and it had all been for nothing. They'd known where she was. This entire time they'd been watching. Jackson grabbed her arm, pulling her back from the desk. Whoever sent that has access to my network. They could be in this building right now. The thought jolted her into action. She stumbled backward, her legs weak, her mind screaming at her to run. But where? If they'd found her here, they could find her anywhere. Jackson was already on his phone. Victor, I need you to trace an internal network breach now. Yes, I know what time it is. Do it anyway. Diane sank into a leather chair, wrapping her arms around herself. It's over, she whispered. They know everything. Where I am, what I'm doing, who I really am. It's not over. Jackson crouched in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. Whoever sent that message made a mistake. They revealed themselves. How is that a mistake? They just threatened my life. Because they're scared. Jackson's voice was fierce, certain. If they wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. This is intimidation, which means you're close to something they can't afford you to find. Diane wanted to believe him, but fear had wrapped itself around her chest like barbed wire, making it hard to breathe. Jackson's phone buzzed. He answered immediately. Talk to me. Diane watched his expression shift. Surprise, then fury so cold it could freeze. Blood. You're certain? A pause. No, don't touch anything. I'll handle this myself. He ended the call, his jaw working like he was trying to swallow broken glass. What? Diane asked, though a part of her didn't want to know. The message came from inside this building, from Marcus' personal terminal. Jackson's hands curled into fists. My consigliere, my brother. The man I've trusted for 15 years. Diane's stomach dropped. Jackson, he's been in my organization since we were kids. Jackson's voice cracked, raw emotion bleeding through his usual control. I pulled him out of hell, gave him everything. Power, money, loyalty, and he's been stealing from me, trying to kill you. We need more proof. The proof is staring us in the face. Jackson exploded, spinning away from her. The files, the theft patterns, the assassination attempt 3 years ago. Marcus handled all of it. He made your case disappear. He had access to your research. He's the only person who could have orchestrated this entire nightmare. Diane stood slowly, her own shock giving way to a terrible, crushing understanding. He used me, used my work to build a theft network you'd never suspect because it mirrored an investigation you thought was dead. And when you showed up at Lavinia, Jackson turned back to her, horror dawning in his eyes. He knew. He's known this whole time exactly who you were. Then why not kill me immediately? Diane's voice shook. Why wait? Because you were invisible. Another waitress in a city of millions. Jackson moved closer, his expression tortured. But the moment I took interest in you, the moment we started digging, you became a threat he had to eliminate. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Marcus had been watching them both, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And now they'd painted targets on each other's backs. He'll come for us, Diane whispered. Let him. Jackson's voice dropped to something deadly. I want him to. Jackson, he's your family. He was my family. Jackson's eyes burned with betrayal and rage. But family doesn't steal. Family doesn't lie. And family sure as hell doesn't try to murder innocent women to cover their crimes. A sound echoed from the hallway, footsteps, calm and unhurried. The office door swung open. Marcus Vale stood in the doorway, gun in hand, his face a mask of cold resignation. I really wish you'd stop digging, Emily, he said quietly. This didn't have to end with both of you dead. Jackson stepped in front of Diane, shielding her with his body. Hello, brother, he said softly. Let's talk about betrayal. Subscribe because what happens next will shatter everything you thought you knew about loyalty. Time slowed to a crawl. Marcus' gun remained steady, pointed at Jackson's chest. Behind him, Diane could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. A countdown to violence she couldn't stop. "Put the gun down, Marcus." Jackson's voice was eerily calm, but Diane felt the tension radiating from his body. "We can still fix this." Marcus laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "Fix this? You think there's a way back from what I've done?" He stepped further into the office, closing the door behind him with his foot. "I've been stealing from you for 2 years, Jackson. I tried to have her killed. There's no fixing that." "Why?" The word ripped from Jackson's throat, raw and wounded. "I gave you everything. You gave me scraps." Marcus' composure cracked, fury bleeding through. "I've been your loyal dog for 15 years while you built an empire. I did your dirty work, cleaned up your mistakes, buried your bodies, and what did I get? A salary, a title, your gratitude." He spat the last word like poison. Diane's mind raced, calculating angles, distances, possibilities. Marcus was 6 feet away, his attention split between them. If she could distract him. "So, you stole from me?" Jackson said, his voice deadly quiet. "Used Emily's research to build a network I'd never trace." Her research was brilliant. Marcus's eyes flicked to Diane. "A perfect blueprint for laundering money right under your nose." "When her case disappeared, I kept copies of everything, insurance," I told myself. But then I realized what I really had. A manual for financial invisibility. "And the assassination attempt?" Diane's voice surprised her with its steadiness. "Necessary?" Marcus' expression remained cold. "You were getting too close to my partners, to the real money network. You had to be eliminated." "But she survived," Jackson said. "And you've been sitting on that secret for 3 years, waiting for her to disappear completely." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Which she did, until you developed your little obsession and dragged her back into my world." Jackson shifted slightly, and Diane realized he was positioning himself, preparing for something. "How much did you take, Marcus? How many millions?" 12. Pride crept into Marcus's voice. 12 million over 2 years. And you never noticed. You were too busy playing king to see the kingdom crumbling beneath you. "The Zurich account," Diane interjected, desperate to keep him talking. "You got sloppy. The patterns were too obvious." "That wasn't sloppiness. That was Victor's incompetence. He stumbled onto irregularities I should have buried deeper. And then you, with your genius forensic brain, connected dots I spent years keeping separate." Marcus' attention shifted fully to her, and Diane saw Jackson's muscles coil. "So now what?" Jackson's voice was almost gentle. "You kill us both and run?" "I kill her." Marcus adjusted his aim toward Diane. "You're more useful alive. At least until I can transfer the remaining funds. Then we'll see." Everything happened at once. Jackson lunged sideways, throwing himself at Marcus with the desperate fury of a man with nothing left to lose. The gun fired, a deafening crack that shattered the office's eerie calm. Glass exploded somewhere behind Diane as the bullet missed Jackson by inches. Diane dove for the desk, her hands scrambling for anything. A paperweight, a letter opener, anything. Her fingers closed around a heavy crystal decanter just as the 2 men crashed into the bookshelf, grappling for control of the weapon. "Run!" Jackson roared, his hands locked around Marcus' wrist, forcing the gun toward the ceiling. "Diane, get out!" But Diane couldn't move, couldn't leave him to fight alone against the man who'd already tried to kill her once. Marcus slammed his elbow into Jackson's face, blood spraying from his nose. The gun swung wildly between them, and Diane realized with horror that if it fired now, it would hit Jackson. She acted on instinct. Rushing forward, she swung the crystal decanter with all her strength, catching Marcus across the temple. He staggered, his grip on the weapon loosening. Jackson seized the opportunity, twisting the gun from Marcus' hand and slamming him against the wall. The gun clattered to the floor between them. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then Jackson's fist connected with Marcus' jaw once, twice, a third time, fueled by 15 years of misplaced trust and shattered brotherhood. Enough! Diane's voice cut through the violence. Jackson, enough! We need him alive. Jackson's fist froze mid-swing, his chest heaving, Marcus blood on his knuckles. Slowly, painfully, he stepped back. Marcus slumped against the wall, conscious but barely. His face a mask of blood and defeat. Call the FBI, Diane whispered, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the decanter. Let's end this the right way. Jackson looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his eyes. For the first time in his life, he chose the law over blood. 3 weeks later, Lavinia Doro blazed with golden light for what would be its final night of operation. Jackson had orchestrated everything with the precision of a man conducting his own funeral. White tablecloths, expensive wine, soft music drifting through speakers, the illusion of celebration masking the execution to come. Diane stood in the kitchen, hidden behind the swinging doors, her laptop connected to the restaurant's projection system. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard despite 3 weeks of preparation. Tonight, they would expose Marcus publicly, hand him to the FBI wrapped in undeniable evidence, and hope the fallout didn't bury them both. You don't have to do this, Jackson said quietly, appearing beside her. He'd worn his best suit, midnight black, crisp white shirt, the tattooed crown on his hand visible as he adjusted his cufflinks. A king preparing to abdicate his throne. Yes, I do. Diane met his eyes, finding strength in the certainty she saw there. We both do. Over the past 3 weeks, they'd built the case meticulously. Bank records, encrypted communications, shell corporation documents, everything Marcus had stolen, everyone he'd bribed, every lie he'd constructed. The FBI had been cooperative once Diane revealed her true identity, eager to finally close the case that had haunted them for 3 years. But they'd agreed to let Jackson handle this his way, one final performance before the law took over. He's here. Victor's voice crackled through Jackson's earpiece. Just sat down at the corner table. Jackson's jaw tightened. Good. Let's give him the show he deserves. He started to leave, but Diane caught his arm. Jackson, wait. He turned back, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Two broken people who'd found something unexpected in the wreckage of their lives. Thank you, Diane whispered, for choosing differently, for not being the man everyone thinks you are. Jackson's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with devastating gentleness. You made me want to be better. His voice was rough with emotion. Whatever happens tonight, I need you to know meeting you was worth all of this. Before Diane could respond, he pressed a brief, fierce kiss to her forehead and disappeared through the swinging doors. Marcus Vale sat at the corner table, surrounded by 6 of Jackson's most trusted lieutenants, who'd worked under his command for years. He looked relaxed, confident, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand. He had no idea he was already dead. Gentlemen, Jackson's voice carried across the dining room as he entered, commanding immediate attention. Thank you for joining me tonight. Marcus raised his glass with a smile. A celebration? Business must be good, boss. Business is illuminating. Jackson took his seat at the head of the table, his movements casual despite the tension coiling beneath his skin. I wanted to gather everyone who's been essential to our organization's success. A toast to loyalty, to brotherhood, to the bonds that hold us together. The men exchanged glances, uncertain of the tone. Jackson raised his own glass. To family, those who stand by us no matter what. To family. The table echoed, drinking, all except Marcus, whose eyes had narrowed slightly. But family is complicated, isn't it? Jackson continued, his voice taking on an edge. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who hurt us most deeply. Marcus set down his glass slowly. Jackson, what's this about? This is about trust. Jackson leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving Marcus's face. About discovering that the man I called brother has been systematically destroying everything I built. The temperature in the room plummeted. That's a serious accusation, Marcus said carefully, but his hand had moved subtly toward his jacket. Jackson snapped his fingers. The lights dimmed, and the wall behind him illuminated with a massive projection screen. Numbers flooded the display, account transfers, routing codes, encrypted communications. Diane's voice came through the speaker system, clinical and precise. $12,300,000 embezzled over 24 months through a network of shell corporations in the Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Luxembourg. Marcus' face went pale. The methodology, Diane continued, mirrors financial patterns documented in a federal investigation 3 years ago, an investigation that mysteriously disappeared along with all evidence and testimony. More documents appeared on the screen. Bank statements with Marcus' fingerprints all over them, emails to offshore accounts, wire transfer authorizations bearing his digital signature. That investigation, Diane's voice softened, nearly cost me my life. The assassination attempt in 2022, ordered and funded by the man sitting at this table. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward. This is fabricated, Jackson. You can't believe. I believe the evidence. Jackson's voice was cold as winter. I believe the forensic accountant who spent 3 weeks rebuilding the case you thought you'd buried, and I believe my own eyes. Marcus, you betrayed me. I gave you everything. Marcus' composure shattered completely, rage and desperation bleeding through. 15 years of loyalty, of doing your dirty work while you played the benevolent king. I deserved more than scraps. So you stole. Jackson stood slowly, his presence dominating the room. You used classified evidence to build a theft network. You tried to murder an innocent woman. You looked me in the eye every day and lied. Marcus' hand darted inside his jacket, but Jackson's men were faster. 3 guns appeared, pointed at Marcus' chest before his fingers touched metal. Don't, Jackson said quietly. You've already lost. The restaurant's front doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in, led by a woman in a sharp suit who flashed her badge. Marcus Vale, you're under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. Marcus' legs seemed to give out. He sank back into his chair, all the fight draining from his body as agents moved to cuff him. You'll go down too, Marcus said hoarsely, looking at Jackson. You think cooperating with them will save you? You're still a criminal, Jackson. You'll still pay. I know. Jackson's voice was steady, resigned. And I'm ready to. Marcus' eyes widened. What? I'm turning myself in. Jackson looked at the FBI agent. Full cooperation on all charges related to my organization's operations in exchange for immunity for everyone else in this room and full protection for Dr. Emily Warren. Diane emerged from the kitchen, tears streaming down her face. Jackson, no. It's already done. He smiled at her, sad, genuine, free. The deal's signed. You get your life back, your real name, your career, and I get to finally stop running from who I was. You can't. Diane's voice broke. We were supposed to do this together. We did. Jackson crossed to her, ignoring the agents, the guns, the witnesses. His hands framed her face like she was something precious. You showed me there's a difference between power and honor. You made me want to be someone worth redemption. Jackson Robert, the FBI agent said firmly. We have a warrant for your arrest as well. I know. Jackson kissed Diane's forehead one last time, lingering, memorizing. Build something beautiful with the life I'm giving you, he whispered. And remember, for the first time, I invested in something real. Then he stepped back, turned, and offered his wrists to the agents. As they led both men away, Marcus in fury, Jackson in quiet dignity, Diane collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking with sobs. On the table where it all began, Victor placed an envelope with her real name written across it. Inside, she would later discover, was everything. Cleared charges, restored credentials, and the deed to a legitimate investment firm bearing a simple note. Your first client just made the best investment of his life. Don't let it go to waste. J.R. 6 months had passed since that night at Lavinia Doro. 6 months of depositions, testimonies, legal proceedings that stretched Diane's nerves to breaking. 6 months of rebuilding Dr. Emily Warren from the ashes of Diane Ellis, reclaiming a name and a life she'd thought were buried forever. And 6 months of Jackson Robert sitting in a federal detention center awaiting trial. Diane stood outside the courthouse now, autumn wind whipping her hair across her face, a subpoena clutched in her trembling hands. The prosecution wanted her testimony, needed it to close the case not just against Marcus, but against Jackson, too. United States versus Jackson Robert. Racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. 23 counts that could put him away for life. Her phone buzzed. Another message from her new attorney. Another reminder of what was at stake. Mitchell, final prep at 2 p.m. This testimony could clear your name permanently. Everything you've worked for comes down to tomorrow. Everything she'd worked for. Her reputation, her career, her freedom from the shadows. All she had to do was tell the truth about Jackson's organization, confirm the evidence, and watch the man who'd saved her life get buried under the weight of his own crimes. Simple. Except nothing about Jackson Robert had ever been simple. Dr. Warren. Diane turned to find a young man in a suit, one of Jackson's attorneys. Mr. Chun, I wasn't expecting. He wants to see you. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. Before the trial, he's asked 3 times, but I told him you'd refused. He paused. Have you? Diane's throat tightened. She'd avoided every letter, every message, every attempt Jackson had made to contact her because seeing him meant facing the impossible choice she'd been running from for 6 months. I can't, she whispered. He said you'd say that. Chun pulled an envelope from his briefcase. He asked me to give you this if you refused. Said you'd understand. Diane took the envelope with shaking hands. Her name, her real name, was written across it in Jackson's bold handwriting. Chun nodded respectfully and walked away, leaving her alone on the courthouse steps. For a long moment, Diane just stared at the envelope. Then, with fingers that barely functioned, she tore it open. Emily. Asterisk, by now you've rebuilt everything they took from you. Your name, your career, your future. I'm glad. That was always the point. Giving you back the life you deserved. Asterisk, tomorrow, they'll ask you to testify, to confirm everything you know about my organization, my crimes, my guilt. And you should. You should tell them everything because it's the truth. And you've spent 3 years running from the truth. Asterisk, but I need you to know something before you do. Loving you was the first honest thing I did in 20 years. Not the alliance, not the deal, not the protection, those were strategy. But somewhere between your sharp answers and sharper eyes, between watching you face down your demons and mine, I fell in love with the woman who made me want to be better. Asterisk, I know you feel it, too. I see it in the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. In the way your hand found mine in the darkness of my office when Marcus held that gun. We don't have to say it out loud for it to be real. Asterisk, but love doesn't erase what I've done. The people I've hurt, the laws I've broken, the empire I built on violence and fear, that's all real, too. And I need to answer for it. Asterisk, so tomorrow, when they put you on that stand, tell them everything. Don't protect me. Don't lie for me. Let me face what I've earned. Because the only way I can become the man you made me want to be is by finally accepting the consequences I've spent a lifetime avoiding. Asterisk, you gave me something I never had, a reason to change. Now, let me give you something in return. Permission to save yourself, even if it costs me everything. Asterisk, I love you, Emily Warren. That's the truest thing I'll ever say. Walk away from this with your head high and your conscience clear. Build the life we both know you're meant for. And if you ever think of me, remember I chose this. I chose you. I chose redemption over running. That's the investment that actually mattered. Always. Asterisk, Jackson. The letter blurred as tears spilled down Diane's cheeks. She sank onto the cold stone steps, her chest heaving with sobs she'd held back for half a year. He loved her, and he was telling her to destroy him anyway. Emily. She looked up through tear-stained vision to find Agent Rodriguez, the FBI agent who'd led the investigation, standing a few feet away, concern etched on her face. I'm fine, Diane managed, wiping her eyes. You don't look fine. Rodriguez sat down beside her, ignoring protocol. Look, I know tomorrow is going to be hard. Testifying against someone who helped you. He didn't just help me, Diane interrupted, her voice raw. He saved me. He chose the law over everything he'd ever known. He gave up his empire, his freedom, his entire life for me. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. And now the law is asking you to return the favor by telling the truth, even though it hurts. It doesn't just hurt. Diane's hands clenched around the letter. It destroys him. 23 counts, life in prison. And my testimony is the keystone holding the prosecution's case together. Because your testimony is credible, unimpeachable. Rodriguez's voice softened. Emily, Jackson Robert made his choices long before he met you. The crimes, the violence, the organization. None of that is your fault. But his redemption is real, Diane whispered. I watched him change. I watched him choose mercy over murder, law over loyalty, sacrifice over survival. Doesn't that count for something? It counts for everything in his sentencing hearing. Rodriguez met her eyes. But first, justice has to be served. You know that better than anyone. You used to fight for it. Diane closed her eyes, Jackson's words echoing in her mind. Asterisk, tell them everything. Don't protect me. Asterisk, what if I can't? Her voice broke. What if I walk into that courtroom tomorrow and I just can't? Then you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Rodriguez stood, offering her hand to help Diane up. But I don't think that's who you are. I think you're the woman who exposed a criminal network knowing it could kill her, who rebuilt her entire life from nothing, who taught a mafia boss that honor means facing consequences, not escaping them. Diane took her hand, rising on unsteady legs. He told you to save yourself, Rodriguez said gently. So save yourself. Testify. Tell the truth. Let him be the man he's trying to become. Someone who finally pays his debts. Diane looked down at the letter in her hands, at Jackson's words written in ink that felt like blood. Asterisk, I chose you. I chose redemption over running. Asterisk, she folded the letter carefully, tucking it against her heart. Okay, she whispered. I'll testify. Rodriguez nodded, squeezing her shoulder before walking away. Diane stood alone on the courthouse steps as the sun set behind the federal buildings, casting long shadows across marble and stone. Tomorrow she would walk into that courtroom. She would swear an oath and she would tell the truth that would imprison the man she loved, because he'd asked her to, because it was the right thing to do, because sometimes love means letting someone face their reckoning, even when it shatters you both. She pressed Jackson's letter against her chest and whispered into the gathering darkness. I love you, too, and I'm sorry. The wind carried her words away, but somewhere in a detention center across the city, Jackson Robert smiled sadly, as if he'd heard. The courtroom was smaller than Emily had imagined for a case this significant. Polished wood, fluorescent lights, rows of spectators separated from justice by a simple wooden railing. She sat in the witness gallery, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white, watching as the prosecution presented their final pieces of evidence. Marcus Vale had already been sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. He'd glared at her as he was led away, his face contorted with rage and resentment. During his sentencing, he shot a look of pure venom at Emily, the hatred radiating off of him. But she'd met his gaze head-on, unflinching, refusing to be intimidated. She knew that some demons lose their power over you the moment you stop being afraid and running. But Jackson's trial was an entirely different beast. He was sitting there at the defense table, looking all sharp in a crisply pressed suit. His hands, though, were a roadmap of his past, covered in tattoos, and he had them folded calmly in front of him. There was a serene look about him that actually made Emily's chest ache with a deep, unsettling feeling. It was like looking at a man who had come to terms with his destiny. He hadn't even glanced in her direction since she'd walked into the courtroom. That stung way more than she wanted to admit. The prosecution calls Dr. Emily Warren to the stand. The bailiff announced, his voice cutting through the tense silence. Emily's heart did a crazy stop and restart thing. A painful thud echoing in her ears as she stood up, her legs shaky, and walked towards the witness box. The bailiff held out a Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" he asked in a practiced tone. Emily managed to get the words out, her voice sounding way steadier than she felt. "I do," she replied. Finally, she sat down and let herself look at Jackson. He was already looking at her, his dark eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that practically stole the air from her lungs. In that single gaze, she saw it all: gratitude, love, a silent goodbye, and a quiet strength that told her he was ready for whatever was coming next. "Tell the truth," his expression seemed to say. "I'm ready." The prosecutor approached, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "Dr. Warren," she began, her voice all business, "can you describe your professional background for the court?" "I was a forensic accountant with the Financial Crimes Bureau," Emily said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I specialized in tracking money laundering operations and the financial networks of organized crime." "And 3 years ago," the prosecutor continued, "you investigated an organization that was led by the defendant Jackson Robert, correct?" "Yes, that's correct," Emily affirmed. "Can you describe what you found during that investigation?" The prosecutor pressed. Emily took a deep breath and then began. She laid out everything in precise detail: the shell corporations, the offshore accounts, the intricate web of financial crimes that Jackson's organization had carried out. She confirmed documents, verified transactions, and authenticated the evidence. She told the truth, plain and simple. Every word felt like a tiny piece of her dying. But she didn't stop. Not because Jackson had asked her not to, but because he deserved to face this with honesty, and because redemption without accountability was just another carefully constructed lie. The prosecutor smiled, seemingly satisfied with Emily's testimony. "And based on your expert analysis, Dr. Warren," she asked, "is there any doubt in your mind that Jackson Robert orchestrated and profited from these criminal activities?" Emily met Jackson's eyes again. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "No," she said quietly but firmly. "No doubt." "Thank you, Dr. Warren," the prosecutor said, turning away. "No further questions, Your Honor." Jackson's attorney stood up, and Emily braced herself for a grueling cross-examination. But instead, the attorney simply said, "The defense has no questions for this witness, Your Honor." Emily blinked in surprise. No questions? No attempt to discredit her testimony or minimize its impact. The judge looked just as puzzled. "Mr. Chun," he said, "are you certain?" "Yes, Your Honor," Chun replied. "Dr. Warren's testimony is accurate. We don't dispute the facts she has presented." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Emily's eyes sought out Jackson's again, searching for answers. He gave her a small, sad, yet proud smile. "I told you," that smile seemed to say. Tell the truth. "I'm ready." You may step down, Dr. Warren," the judge said, breaking the silence. Emily walked back to her seat in a daze, her legs barely holding her up. As she passed Jackson's table, his hand moved slightly, his fingers reaching out towards her for just a brief moment before he pulled back. She wanted to grab that hand, to stop everything, and scream that he had changed, that he deserved mercy, that love should count for something in these cold, calculated equations of justice. But she kept walking. The verdict came 3 days later. Guilty on 18 counts. Not guilty on 5 where the evidence had been circumstantial. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. Emily sat in her new office, a modest space in a downtown building. Her name was on the door in gold letters. Dr. Emily Warren, financial consultant. She stared at the news article on her computer screen. "Notorious crime boss faces 25 years in federal prison," the headline screamed. 25 years. Jackson would be 60 when he got out, an old man, his empire reduced to dust, his life consumed by the consequences of his actions. He had finally stopped running. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A text from an unknown number. *unknown. He wanted you to have this final gift before sentencing. Chin. *. A link appeared below the text. Emily clicked it with shaking hands. It opened to a legal document. The deed to Lavinia Doro, the restaurant where everything had begun. The property had been seized by the government but was now being released as part of Jackson's cooperation agreement. The new owner, according to the paperwork, was Emily Warren. Attached was a video file titled simply, "For Emily." She almost didn't click it. She almost couldn't bear to see his face, to hear his voice. But her finger moved before her mind could stop it. Jackson appeared on the screen, sitting in what looked like a detention center visiting room. He looked tired, but calm, at peace in a way she'd never seen before. "Emily," he said, and her heart broke at the gentleness in his voice. "If you're watching this, then the trial's over and you told the truth. Thank you for that. Thank you for not protecting me when I didn't deserve protection." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I'm giving you Lavinia because it's where we met, where you saw through me in 30 seconds and started the chain reaction that saved my life, even if it cost me my freedom." His smile was bittersweet. "I need you to do something for me. Take that restaurant and transform it into something legitimate, something that helps people instead of serving as a front for criminals. Build something beautiful where there used to be corruption." Jackson's eyes grew intense, focused directly into the camera, as if he could see her through time and space. "And while you're building, I need you to live, Emily, really live. Fall in love again with someone good, someone who deserves you. Build a career that makes you proud. Wake up every morning without looking over your shoulder." His voice cracked slightly. "I'll be okay. For the first time in my life, I'll be paying for my mistakes instead of burying them. That's not punishment. That's freedom." He stood up, preparing to leave, then turned back one last time. "I love you, Emily Warren," he said, his voice full of emotion. "Loving you was the first true thing I ever did. And if this is how that truth ends, with you free and me finally accountable, then it was worth every second." The screen went black. Emily sat in her office, tears streaming silently down her face, and whispered to the empty room, "I love you too." 6 months later, the courtroom was packed for Jackson's sentencing hearing. Emily sat in the front row, her heart in her throat as the judge reviewed the case. Character witnesses had spoken. Surprisingly, several community members Jackson had quietly helped over the years. His attorney had presented evidence of his cooperation, his remorse, and his genuine transformation. The judge looked down at Jackson. "Mr. Robert," he said, "do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Jackson stood up, his posture straight and dignified. "Yes, Your Honor," he said. "I'm guilty of everything the prosecution proved. I hurt people, broke laws, built an empire on fear. I have no excuses." He paused, his eyes finding Emily's in the crowd. "But I also want to thank the woman who showed me I could be more than my worst choices. Because of her, I'm standing here today accepting responsibility instead of running from it. That's the only redemption I need." The judge nodded slowly. "The court appreciates your candor," he continued. "Given your cooperation and evidence of genuine rehabilitation, this court sentences you to 15 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole after 8 years for continued good behavior and cooperation." Emily's breath caught. 8 years, not 25, not life. 8 years. Jackson's expression didn't change, but she saw his shoulders relax slightly, a hint of relief he'd never admit to wanting. As the marshals led him away, Jackson turned one last time. His eyes met Emily's across the crowded courtroom, and he mouthed 3 words. "Build something beautiful." Then he was gone. 5 years later, Lavinia Doro had been reborn. No longer a haven for criminals, it now served as a community center. Financial literacy workshops were held on the 2nd floor, and the 1st floor housed a restaurant that employed people rebuilding their lives after incarceration. Emily stood at the entrance, looking at the brass plaque beside the door. The Second Chance Initiative, founded in memory of those who chose redemption over running. Her phone buzzed with a message from the prison system. Asterisk Jackson Robert approved for visitor registration. Asterisk her hands trembled as she typed back. Asterisk I'll be there Saturday. Asterisk on the table where they'd first met, preserved exactly as it had been that night, sat an envelope she'd received that morning. Inside, in Jackson's handwriting, was a letter. Emily, * 3 more years and I'm eligible for parole. I've been using the time to get my degree in business ethics, ironically. I'm teaching other inmates about financial literacy, helping them avoid the mistakes I made. I heard about what you did with the restaurant. I knew you'd build something beautiful. ***, I don't expect you to wait for me. I don't expect anything. But I hope you're happy. I hope you're living the life you deserve. And I hope maybe when I get out, you'll let me buy you dinner at our restaurant and tell you about the man I've become. Still yours, Jackson. Emily smiled through tears, pulling out a pen and fresh paper. Jackson, I'll be waiting. And yes, dinner sounds perfect. For the first time in both our lives, let's invest in something real. Always, Emily. She sealed the letter, pressed a kiss to the envelope, and looked out at the city that had witnessed their destruction and their redemption. Some love stories ended in tragedy, but theirs ended in truth, accountability, and the quiet promise of second chances earned through sacrifice. And that, Emily thought, was the most beautiful investment of all.